Phoenix. And Elaine, who's back after a little bit of an absence, lives in Southern California. And she is another one of our fearful flyers who is now fearless. And she has helped us, and she's very active in the group. So we want to welcome Elaine back. And thanks a lot, Elaine, for joining us tonight. I think we got her strangled right now, so she can't.
Yeah.
But she'll make an appearance here, I'm sure, sooner or later. This is Fearless Flight. It's for anybody who has a fear of flying, anybody who knows someone who has a fear of flying, or just someone who likes to talk about airplanes and flying and listen to Eric and I tell stories. And we never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So that's always fun there. We always highlight our Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather group. You see that on the screen right now. And we would, if you're not a member, I think Dieter was telling me we have 670 people in the membership. We want to push it as quickly as we can over to 700, and we're well on our way there. And tonight I want to feature this gentleman is going to come on board with us and be our guest coming up. But he wrote a fantastic post in the Birds of a Feather thing. You're going to get the really good stuff in the Birds of a Feather group. We love you to show up on our page. We love you to like the page and all that. But if you really want to get the best support out of here, join the Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather. Nobody bites that we know of so far. And so just these are some of the comments that Joe made. He hadn't flown for 20 years, missed some really significant events in his life. And the thought of getting on an airplane just petrified him. So many of you could probably identify with that. When he finally flew, after using the Fearless Flight kit, and particularly the harmonizer, his first day of back flying was 3 flights, including his third leg, which was landing in Las Vegas during some pretty strong crosswinds there. And that's colorful sometimes, because when you land, you're looking at the runway as a passenger, and you think, wait a minute, if I'm looking at the runway, what are those guys up front looking at anyway? It was kind of a thrill for him. And you've been talking to Joe, Dieter. You have any other comments that come to mind there?
Oh, well, one of the things that Joe was gracious enough is that he actually recorded us an audio message as well that we are incorporating into the Cleared for Takeoff 201 online course. So he's just, he's one of those people, Ron, and I know Eric and Diane, you guys know that when people really get through to the other side, so to speak, when they get from impossible to not only possible, but dare I say, enjoy flying, many of them really want to turn around and give back. And Joe is one of those people who just really, I think, really gets it when you're in that space of it's impossible and I'm so anxious and I'm freaking out. Don't put me into this little metal, cylinder. But yeah, that to me is true service, and he's just a really cool human being. And I'm excited to have him on the show. Is it next week or soon, right?
Yeah, we got another guest next week, but he's going to let me know when he can get on. And I had a little bit of a conversation with Joe later today just to clarify some things. And I told him we were going to talk about the chapter in the book on claustrophobia. And that wasn't Joe's issue, but he did share with me. So I'll just do this real quick here. His issue was more fear of falling out of the sky. And being involved with Fearless Flight helped him dispel that fear. And so he just wanted to encourage everybody out there just to get it done. You gotta take action. Sooner or later, you got to get on the plane is another famous quote from one of our other past fearful flyers. So anyway, and we put him on here because Joe is a member of the Birds of a Feather, and it shows you what kind of people we've got over there. Tonight's poll question. You can tell we're moving towards a podcast. So would you be interested in a live podcast with the ability to call in live with questions and comments? And in addition to just the yes or no, if you got any thoughts about it, or, yay, I'd really like to do that, or no, I'm probably not going to pick up the phone and talk to you live in front of God and everybody. but it wouldn't be painful. I guarantee that. And there's several formats out there for podcasts. And the one that I'm leaning towards is to actually have a live podcast where you can do that, because that's really, that's much more popular, much more helpful to people. And once we get it going and get a few people going like that, and it would be recorded and available for replay. So take a look at that through, if you're join with us now, or if you're watching the replay, put a comment down there, let us know yes or no you'd be interested. And any other comments that you might have to go along with
Ron,
that.
I got a great comment here to just here, let me just say that. Okay, Judy Hill. I read your book in 4 days, left on my first flight ever this past week, and thought I was going to lose it, but never did. So proud of myself. So I just want to, celebrate you, Judy. Thank you for just
really
sharing
kind.
it.
Yeah. And that was, we didn't pay her. We didn't even know she was going to make a comment there. So,
and Tiffany,
we love hearing that. Yeah. We love hearing things like that.
Yeah.
And the 4 days on the book, you can tell that's a book that I wrote, because I only write ones that are short with a lot of pictures in them so I can read them. Because most people don't read books. They buy them for other reasons there. So anyway.
I was just having a pang of regret that after the claustrophobia chapter, we didn't have a chapter on plummeting, because it always comes up and we could have had a lot of fun with it.
We're going to talk about plummeting coming up.
That may be my favorite word, is plummeting.
So, okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the book review, chapter 5, which is about claustrophobia. And then we got a few items in aviation update. And as always, we'll take your questions live in the remarks there, or any way you can get them to us. So, okay, let's move on. And of course, this is the book that Judy was talking about. It's available on Amazon or where books are sold. And they're going like hotcakes. I always want to say that. I can't prove that, but we have done pretty well, and we won't keep people out there. The book itself is designed so that you can pick it up and read any part of it. You don't have to start at one end and go to the other. You can look through the table of contents, find things that interest you first, and take a look at them. And I think more often than reading straight through, I think the more valuable it will be to you is the more times you pick it up and put it down and think about it in between. So tonight we're going to talk about chapter 5, which is a short chapter in there, because it's a subject that is kind of a subset of anxiety disorder, in that it's kind of specialized there. And that is claustrophobia. Let me get caught up with you on the slides here. And one question people ask me is, why did they have to make the airplane look like a coffin, Ron? And I never actually thought about that until that was raised, but it kind of does in a way. But it's not what the airplane looks like. It's a story you tell yourself about that. And most people who have a fear of flying have at least one other anxiety disorder, and oftentimes it is claustrophobia. Claustrophobia, that's the most common one that people have reported over the years. Very common with fear of flying, because of the fact that you are confined, and you get to a point where you not even worried about being trapped and locked in there, but more people are worried about the fact that they might lose control of their emotions and not be able to manage it. And that's why we've got flight attendants like Diane who can come over. She's got a rubber chicken she'll slap you with if you no. She's doing her best to be like Johnny Appleseed.
You're giving away my trade secrets.
And she's making the airplanes a safer place to fly. So anyway, all right. Claustrophobia, like I said, it has nothing to do with worrying about airplanes crashing and dying and all those kinds of things. It's a fear of feeling trapped or worried about whether or not you'll be able to handle it emotionally. It's nothing more than a specific type of trigger. And if you remember back in, I think it was chapter 2, we talked about triggers, and those are the items that come into your awareness and your consciousness, and they trigger your biology, and all of a sudden you become more concerned about that than you do about whatever it was you were thinking about beforehand. We have a case study in the book here. we'll call him Charles. He was a retired New York police officer, and I met him. His history was he took a short flight to California way back when and noticed that things were, they were different. What does that tell most people? It means that something's going on inside of me. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to anything to do with the airplane, but he began to feel claustrophobic. His heart started to race, thought he was going to have a panic attack, couldn't wait to get off the airplane. And he ended up driving back from his destination. And the worst thing is, I wish I had a graph here, but when we talked about anticipatory anxiety, but when you're anxious or thinking about getting anxious, if you can imagine, on the one scale, see, is that you see that on the right side of your screen or the left side of your screen? My hand.
Sorry?
Oh, it's on the right. For me, it's on.
Okay, so everything's backwards.
Except
so
we're sharing, yeah,
this-
and we're sharing
This
the
were the
screen.
level of anxiety, and at the bottom here was time. Okay, the more you think about it, the more the graph goes up, the more your anxiety comes up. And so as it gets worse and worse and worse, which it was in Charles' case, some people make the decision to get off, which is an avoidance technique, and it's not good because when you get off, yes, your anxiety does plummet. Good place to use the word plummet, but also it gets stored in your memory there as a tool that you can use for relief. And the worst thing about it is in the future, you don't remember that. I mean, you remember this much more but part of that is you kind of have an imaginary line that you never got to experience. And you think of how much worse it would have been if you'd stayed on there. And the truth of the matter is, when you get on the airplane and you hang in there and you use some of the tools, techniques, and strategies that we'll teach you at Fearless Flight, then you'll be able to bridge that. And within a couple of minutes of the flight, most people calm way down. So that's the real disadvantage of avoidance. So he couldn't wait to get off, drove back home, and he was diagnosed with PTSD. And I might add that he had been through 9/11, and that was in his history. So he had a good reason to do that. But of course, 9/11 had nothing to do with flying per se, unless you were worried about terrorism or something like that. So he moved to Phoenix, found Fearless Flight, but now he was stuck. Now he can't go anywhere, because even back to visit his friends and relatives back in New York, because he can't get on an airplane, and the only way he can go is to drive, and that became too cumbersome to do. And the question that kept playing in his mind was, what happens if I get on the airplane and that happens to me again? Like I said, the graph just keeps visualizing in his mind, and he's worried about that. And he was not worried about, he's one of those that wasn't worried about crashing and dying, just instead being able to manage his emotions on board. So he made a commitment, like I said, to never get on a plane again. And Charles was a classic avoider. And like I said, it instills in you an even bigger fear the next time you think about flying. So when he came to us, he got the Fearless Flight Kit right away, and he used it in a couple of ways, which I'll highlight here in just a minute. But started to desensitize himself, came to the class. He was able to come to the class down here and actually sit on the airplane a little bit. He took our 201 class, which Dieter talked about, and is going to be one of our online offerings here in the future. And then he flew with us on a 301 class, which is also one of the things that we're hoping to do down the road there when COVID passes and people start going back into a normal part of life there. Basically did one step at a time. And the other thing is he met the girl of his dreams. That was the good news. The bad news was she happened to live in the Philippines. She was from Europe, but she was working as a nurse in the Philippines. And he's one of three people the three former Fearful Flyers who have married women from the Philippines. So if you're having trouble finding a partner, come to us. We'll find you a gal in the Philippines if you can't.
And very poor train service to the Philippines from the United States. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
What's that?
Very poor train service from the West Coast of the United States to the Philippines.
And you can't fly.
They're going to have to fly.
Okay. All right. So how to cope with claustrophobia? Well, the one thing you want to do, you want to prepare in advance. That's always a thing that is the first thing we recommend, but it's the last thing people think about. They somehow think that by just doing the same thing over and over, going to and trying to fly after a bad experience or no experience, they think that somehow they're going to magically become better. No, it's not going to work like that. You've got to find some tools, strategies, and techniques that you can use. So we recommend educating yourself, and a good way to start with that is the Fearless Flight Kit. It has some tools in there that will educate you. Stick with us in the groups here and look for our classes when they come up online. And get some coaching. That's one of the shortest ways. About half the people that call me within 48 hours of needing to fly somewhere, and we're able to get them on, but it's usually through coaching and having the Fearless Flight Kit. Second thing to think about is distract your mind. The quickest way you're going to get on an airplane is to be able to quiet that smoke alarm that goes off in your head and tells you that what you're about to do is dangerous. So if you can first learn how to distract, although that's not a long-term goal, we don't want you to have to distract yourself all the time, but that is the way to get on initially, and we will help you learn some things that will help replace your fear over the long haul. Ways to distract yourself is using the Fearless Flight Kit, in particular the Fearless Flight Harmonizer inside of that, to drown out that little voice that once it starts clamoring at you and yelling at you, it refuses to quit. And then the Fearless Flight Harmonizer has some technology built into it, binaural sound in there, where we alternate the sound from one ear to the other, similar to what they do in EMDR. That's the eye movement therapy, where they desensitize people. And the other thing is multi-evocation. We have multiple tracks on there, voice, sound effects, and music, talking and playing together, which gives your mind a challenge on trying to pick that out. And it usually has a preference for that over what it was worried about before. And then the last step is practicing mindfulness and meditation, just breathing. And that's one of the big things to do. Again, the harmonizer is a dynamic sort of meditation. So for those of you who can't jump right in and practice the more traditional meditation, where you're trying to quiet yourself because that little voice just seems to take over in your mind, the harmonizer is what I call a dynamic meditation. And the theory was, if you can't beat them, join them. So rather than trying to quiet it out, we add a lot more noise in there. And then go to our Fearless Flight Hub for additional NeuroSync meditations. That's the Flight Harmonizer is one example of NeuroSync Hub, where we use content and the technology mixed together in a way that helps you override those crazy voices inside of you. Okay, and then some other things to do: avoid stimulants. I know a lot of you can't get through the day without your Starbucks, but that's not the best thing to do if you have anxiety. So you want to cut back on that. And talk quickly about medications. Medications can be good and useful. I totally support the use of them, but I do encourage you to do that under the guidance of your doctor. And a lot of doctors these days will prescribe many things, particularly those in the benzodiazepine family, like Xanax and Ativan. And they'll do it as a favor to you, more or less. But what I recommend is to get it, talk to them about it. What are the side effects? Read the side of the bottle, because one of the things that people have found out often too late is that Xanax, for example, one of the side effects is it actually can increase your anxiety in some people. So you want to try that outside of the airplane before you ever try it under fire. So watch your caffeine intake. And of course, if you go through the airport, they got lots of sugar and stuff like that. And you want to keep your blood level, sugar level in your blood more balanced. And so easy on that. And the last thing is to book the right seat. Some of you may feel better, at least initially, if you're claustrophobic, sitting on an exit row or on an aisle seat where you're there. You may want to sit in the exit row. But one thing about the exit row that we caution you on, you have to do what, Diane?
You have to be willing and able to assist in the event of an emergency.
Right.
And you have to be able to answer me verbally, yes or no. And if you're not comfortable, I will have to reseat you.
Right. So that makes sense that you would do that. But so maybe that isn't the first thing you do when you get back into flying, but down the road, maybe you can just compliment yourself when you feel more comfortable in there. If you use our strategy of advising the gate agent that you have a medical condition so that you can get preferential seating, If it's on an airline like Southwest that does not pre-assign seats, you identify to them that you need a special seat, and then you will go down early, and that'll give you time to introduce yourself to the flight attendant that greets you and the pilots. And if you've ever done coaching with me or listened to some of my past presentations, you know how important that is, I think, for fearful flyers. If you're on an airline that has non-pre-assigned seats, what you'll do is tell them that you need a little bit more time boarding, and then when you get down there, you'll do that. And
Ron,
so
before we jump in, so I just want to acknowledge Tiffany. Tiffany, you may be I don't know, let us know in chat if that's your first FearlessFlight live show. From what I gather is you're flying in 4 days, and you had some really good questions about, you know, claustrophobia, and also Tiffany wanted to know about the harmonizer, and because you mentioned that in the FearlessFlight kit. So I did already put the link in there to the flight kit, but maybe you can just.
Tiffany, do not hesitate to sign up for a 15-minute free coaching session.
Yeah, I put the link in there. Yeah, I put the link in there.
I know Deidre has. We can talk tomorrow. There's no reason for you to embark on this with the way that it sounds like you're feeling right now. Okay, so I'm glad you're here. We're all glad you're here, and definitely, hopefully, it'll make it worth your while to ring me up. I know that there's some slots available tomorrow and the next day there. So use that link, and we'll talk all about the harmonizer. We'll talk about the flight kit. We'll talk about all those remedies there. So the last thing on picking a seat, some people may want the window seat. You know, I have people that say, no, I don't want to look out. I want to pull the curtain down. So be it. We don't care, but you just have to know what's best for you. So aisle or window, you be the judge of that. Okay. And then the most important thing, well, maybe not most important, but one of the things that we started the show each time with is join the birds of a feather, because you get a lot of free information from people out there who have been right where you have. Okay, so the key takeaways from the chapter on claustrophobia are that it's a unique experience that often accompanies anxiety due to flying, and but it's really just another trigger. And so we don't treat claustrophobia per se. It's just part of the multifaceted treatment that we use for making you're able to be comfortable with your anxiety there. It's an emotional trigger for sure, and it keeps a lot of people in misery. Okay, tonight on the Aviation News Update, we had a couple of stories. One just general interest there, and this is about a couple airplanes. One airplane looks very similar to the other one there, Eric.
Well, I think it's exactly the same thing with nicer paint. And I just had 2 comments about the claustrophobia chapter. If any of you guys or gals can come up with a design that does not look like a coffin, that has a lower drag profile, in other words, less fuel to push it through the air for you to sit in, the airlines will pay you an obscene amount of money for your design, and probably give you free passes to Disneyland for life for you and the kid. And I was actually feeling extra empathy for Charles, the poor guy from New York. He comes to Phoenix, and then he falls in love with a woman from the Philippines, so he has to fly. And I don't think there's anybody in Phoenix from New York anyway. I see a license plate once a year, maybe. Oh, she says I'm lying. It was probably just me driving by Charles, so he didn't have anybody here to talk to anyway. Evidently, I'm lying. Diane says this is not true. So I'm gonna stop that. But we're gonna talk about just a little in the aviation department what happens to someone.
This is where the airplanes go when they put them on the passenger.
Yeah, this is when the airplanes go out to the boneyard and pasture. Not all of them end up shaving people's faces and legs. Many of them are converted to cargo aircraft, and we're going to talk about a company that does that in the process. The company mentioned in the article that we're referencing is Israeli Aerospace Corporation that's been in business for many, many decades and do a fine job. And part of the process they do, and Ron has a bunch of slides, and so does Dieter, in converting freighters, the most visible is the top airplane that has not been painted. they install a massive cargo door so they can get stuff besides small boxes into the airplane. Obviously, it doesn't have much utility unless they can load big pallets on forklifts into the interior part of the airplane. And this is a picture of a 767-300ER, both of them, which is a very popular airplane. And Amazon and their contractor Atlas has snapped up all of Americans, and I think all of Delta's and any others they can get their hands on to convert. So not necessarily in order, but the first thing that needs to be done is that cargo door needs to be installed. The entire interior is stripped out. The windows are covered over because the boxes don't care if they can see outside or not. And big improvements are made to the flooring so that it can handle an immense amount of weight, and the pallets on the flooring, and they install rollers so the pallets can be rolled to the back and rolled back out to make it easier to load and unload. And also in the interior, they install greatly improved fire suppression systems throughout the cabin, because essentially now the entire airplane is a cargo compartment. They'll also reinforce the cockpit. The pilots don't need to go in and out except for to powder their nose or whatever. So the cockpit's reinforced, and communications systems are upgraded or modified to customer demand. And let me see if I got about everything here. Just about off of page one. They paint the airplane or not, depending on what the customer wants to do. They have to take the airline logos off, but occasionally you'll see telltale stripes from one of the major airline logos if the airplane isn't completely repainted. The whole process takes about 4 months. And Israeli Aircraft says they are running about a 2-year backlog now to get anybody in. And the CEO there was a very funny guy also. He says, if you need to get it done before the end of 2022, to write a note and roll it up and put it into the west wall and pray to God that somebody sees it. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to get it done. They have 3 sites now. They're opening a 4th, and they anticipate having 7 sites to do this by the end of 2024. So while the pandemic has brought all these great changes to work, they think that the freight demand and freight shipping is not going to drop off. No. These 767s pictured here, if they're in pristine condition, can be acquired for $13 to $14 million, and then another $15 million to convert them, which is a lot of money if you were going to buy toys with it. But a brand new 767 still comes off the Boeing line for about $220 million. So that price difference will pay for an immense amount of modifications to the airplane, and it can fly for a long time. The boxes don't care if they're in an old airplane. They don't cry about their seat. They always wear their masks, and they don't show up drunk. So
they don't want a Diet Coke.
That's right. They don't want a Diet Coke, and so they make pretty ideal passengers, and they can fly on those airplanes for many, many decades if the airplane is well maintained.
Yeah.
So many of you out there, hey, from time to time ask, how can an airplane fly for so long, and does it get tired? Does it get worn out or anything like this? Well, this is one reason we wanted to talk about this. This is what happens. These could be flying for a much longer time, but the reason they take them out of service is because the airlines, particularly during downtimes like the COVID era that we're in, and when they're not flying as many airplanes and expenses are eating them alive, they go to more efficient ones. So that's when airplanes are much more likely to be recycled due to financial times than they are from actual age on an airplane, because these cargo airplanes will fly for an extended period of time. So, okay, with that, let's talk about Diane had a little story this week. There was apparently someone on the plane who was trying to encourage Diane to take early retirement. And so what was that all about?
Medical leave of some variety.
Medical leave, there you go.
Yes. I fly in a regional jet. And of course, one of the things, if you fly, that you're always going to hear is the flight attendants saying that we ask you to remain seated. Obviously, you have to stay seated until that seatbelt sign goes off when we get to the gate. And in addition, because of COVID, our airline and many of the airlines have asked or have an additional announcement that we ask you to remain seated and we deplane one row at a time. So everybody's not jammed together in the aisle like they are very often when they're boarding. Having said that, this past trip, I had a somewhat unsettling experience. I was flying forward. I was the forward flight attendant, which means that one of my duties is when we land and the seatbelt sign goes off, I get up, stow my jump seat, lift the handle, and then push the door open. Briefly, there was a picture of that on this particular aircraft, the CRJ700. There's a door that we push open, and there's stairs, which can be utilized, but for the most part, we use either ramps or certainly a jet bridge. In this instance, and most instances, we use a jet bridge to deplane our passengers. On this particular flight, we were running a little late for other reasons, and we had several passengers who were very anxious because they had very close connections. And we're very sensitive to that, and we do our best on board to give them whatever information that we have available. So this particular Saturday morning, I got up, stowed my jump seat, pushed the door open, and a passenger who had a very close connection and didn't understand the fact that just because the door was open did not mean the jet bridge was there, came and literally pushed me toward the door. And of course I had to say, please, ma'am, get back, and all those other kinds of things. And what it didn't really, as I had explained to the guys earlier, my first thought always is for the safety of my passengers. I didn't want her falling out into the abyss, because it's going to take a few minutes for the jet bridge to be driven over to the aircraft. And what I realized later when I was driving home from the airport was that she could have pushed me out of the plane. So we do want you, we always want you, please listen to the announcements. But if you do have a connection, please wait until it's safe to deplane. We just don't want people leaping out into the air and then falling 6 or 7 or 8 feet down.
And Diane can
I don't want that either for me.
If she gets pushed, she's going to grab the closest person to her.
I won't be the only one going out.
So you'll now see Diane wandering through the airport with a tether around her waist with a lanyard, so that she can make sure that she doesn't happen. That doesn't happen.
I don't fall out of the plane. Yeah.
So. All right. Closing up the week is we have a crazy story. I mean, cats are always in the news, right, on the internet. Well, here's a different kind of a cat story, and that is there was a feline hijacking, they call it. It was a cat. Allegedly a domestic house cat that was boarded the airplane at some point in time in Khartoum on Sudanese Turco airline bound for Qatar's capital Doha, and they no more than got airborne, and this cat had decided that she was a fearful flyer and went crazy. And it happened to be in the cockpit. It wasn't in the aft part of that. And in the story, they talk about this isn't the first time, it's happened before. But it was so chaotic that they actually, and the cat was just absolutely crazy. They had to turn around and go back. So I had a good pun for that, but I forgot it now. And I was telling the rest of my group here that when I was in the military, I taught foreign pilots, and I had some students from Jordan, and one of the fellows there, and these were seasoned pilots. We were checking them out in my airplane. And one of them told me about a story where they, in a fighter airplane, you just got the little canopy that comes over you and just enough room for one person to sit in there. So he takes off, and he's got a wingman one day, and the wingman all of a sudden starts screaming over the radio and said, I got a cat in here. And so the lead was thinking, well, chill out, dude. It's just a cat. And apparently it was a bobcat. And when I noticed this happened in Sudan, this was obviously in Jordan, and where the night temperatures it gets chilly for an animal, from an animal's point of view. And so they theorized that the cat just crawled up in there and crawled down under the seat, which is the only possible place that he could have positioned himself without being seen by the pilot or one of the ground crew there. Anyway, and when, like this cat, he had enough when they got airborne and the airplane starts to pressurize and make noise and all that. He came out like a scalded rabbit, and he got up right in the windscreen, and he was convinced that he needed to take out the pilot there, and it must have been colorful. I haven't seen the movie version of it yet, but it was so funny things happen, and if it can happen anywhere, it can happen on an airplane, and that's not the best thing for things to happen. So any other questions or comments or anything, Dieter?
Well, there are a couple, so let me just stop the share real quick, and then so here's a couple. Jim Duke asked, did the plane make a feline back to the to the airport?
Good one, Jim.
That's a great one. That,
Jim.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
I
And
knew Jim would have
and Jim is on a roll because he also had another comment. So I'll let you guys check that out in the comments later. But Jeff said, you know, the group and you, Ron, helped him overcome his fear. Because but I found that all the people on the plane made me feel good, and that's kind of cool because everyone was kind and the stewardess were so kind. It was fun. And then he says, I just need to do it again. And that is, you know, this is why we're going through this book week after week, to kind of help and refresh all the concepts that all of you that are watching and have been connected with us have already learned. We just are refreshing.
You don't learn to play a piano or play golf or tennis or anything like that by doing it, you know, until you get competent and then never doing it again. You practice. So that's why it's important to collaborate, which is one of the things that the Birds of a Feather group does. It helps people collaborate with each other, and the people that come back week after week, those are the people that get better. You have to be committed to it, and we here are committed to that and helping you, and we hope you keep coming back every week. So thanks again to Dieter and to Diane and Eric, and looking forward to working with Elaine on a more frequent basis. And we hope you'll come back next week for another edition of Fearless Flight Live. So have a great week, everybody, and stay safe. Don't give up now on the COVID. We're coming down the home stretch.
Almost there.
Bye.